What's up?
Hey, Ramon.
How you doing?
Doing good. How are you doing?
I'm doing great. I'm sending something to Vera. Some reason she's not. I like the way I listened to the recording of the last week, and he went better than ever. Where everybody takes a chapter.
Yeah.
I really like that, and it's less stress for me. You see what you see in the background, Ken, is Bell Labs, where I used to work for 10 years.
Oh, wow. That's cool.
Te lo acabo de mandar te lo acabo de mandar a ti. Te lo mandé por correo electrónico también.
Okay, ya voy, bye.
What are those glass enclosures behind you, Ramon?
What do you mean glass enclosures?
Well, it looks like there's some kind of glass displays or something on the floor.
Well, those are actually, that's actually Bell Labs. It's one of these buildings that was built by one of the great architects. It's one of the first buildings that you could move the walls, okay?
Yeah.
And it's basically self-heating. You didn't need any, the human body could do that. You could move all the walls. And those things you see already, they're hallways, okay? And then they have this place in the middle where there are fountains.
Hi.
Okay, so that's actually 5,000 people used to work there. And an office on the third floor of that.
You still didn't answer my question. What are those glass things that looks like bowls turned upside
I
down?
think they're fountains.
They're fountains.
Oh, okay.
I thought you were talking about the holes. That's a fountain.
Yeah.
Hey, Bobby,
Hey, I'm working on trying to get my tech working here, guys.
can I start with some challenges for you?
Sure.
That's gonna make you hurt a little bit.
I don't
Yeah,
like
go ahead.
anybody to be hurt in this program, so if you want to hurt somebody, I'm leaving.
No, I'm just kidding. Hey, Bobby, I wanted to talk about something, and basically it's a challenge, but I'm going to challenge you anyway because I think you have shown in the past that you can subject yourself to my my criticism. I started reading this book. A couple of weeks ago it was #1 in the New York Times bestsellers list. Last week it was 3rd, and now it's number 10. And the part that I'm right now is one in which he talks about what happens when you let your beliefs become part of your identity. Basically, if you let your belief become part of your identity, no amount of evidence or reasoning can change your mind. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
It blanked out for a minute, but I did read what you sent in the email briefly.
Well, I didn't send the email. Basically, what is going on, if you let your what you believe be part of your email, of your identity or your ego or something, no amount of information is going to change. In fact, the more information you have, the worse you get. And I want to go ahead and use, can you see this? I'm kind of pulling something here from the book called The Righteous Mind.
Okay.
A book called Conservatism, and it has a simple difference between what is called an orthodox and a conservative. An orthodox is somebody who believes that they got the truth and their function is to persuade others of the truth, okay? You know, I mean, a Christian fundamentalist, whatever, is an orthodox, not a conservative, because they have this belief that what is right, and then they just try to persuade society that that is what's going on. Now, they have actually shown that if you are somebody who has a belief, I'm going to go very quickly over these and then you decide what is going. They have actually found out that if you are a person like that, has a belief that you identify with, the more statistic you know, the worse it gets. Because you become better. I mean, if you go ahead and get a person who really believes in, you know, that gun control is bad, you present some data supporting good controls, and then you take another group and have the same data supporting climate change. Now, if you happen to be a conservative who believes good control is bad, you'll come up with all the more statistics you know, the more holes you'll find in the argument, and it goes the other way around, okay? So the other thing that is kind of under history, basically when you happen to believe, you become identified with your belief, and they become so important, and the more you know, you use what you know, not to learn and change your mind, but to show yourself and others that you're right. So you become an expert on what is called motivated reasoning. You ever heard of what is motivated reasoning?
I get the gist.
Motivated reasoning is something where you actually, you actually use you read all about, for example, the people believe in conspiracy theories. They learn about all kinds of stuff, and the more they learn, the more they actually, basically the purpose of learning is to come up with a more persuasive argument against the people who don't believe like you do, okay? So that's called motivated reasoning. You start with a belief of whatever that is, and then just get really good at coming up with an argument that supports your belief, okay? Anyway, I don't think, you know, I just wanted to tell you that because the schedule is to go over the book, so I don't want to go over that, but the book is really nice, and I'm learning a lot from it. One of the things that I learned is that there are people that are happy when they're shown that they're wrong. Like Kahneman, you know, Kahneman, the guy who wrote this book about thinking fast and slow.
Fast and slow.
Every time, you know, I mean, when, you know, one time the author of this book presented something that showed he was wrong, and he was just elated. And he talked about, you know, so if you want to work on your mind, you have to value not sticking to your beliefs, but to being able to change your mind. I mean, if you know, your self-worth.
Ramon, may I say something?
Yeah, let me just finish one more word. Your self-worth should be that you're the type of person that when evidence comes your way, you're willing to change your mind. And then I wanted to challenge Bobby on one more thing, which is the following. There's some conclusions that are kind of interesting. One of them, well, first of all, before I do that, what do you think? What do you think nowadays? You told me recently that you changed your mind about evolution. You believe in evolution?
I think that some arguments are credible, yes.
Well, anyway, at one time many years ago, Bobby told me that evolution works only within a species, which basically all the evidence is that it works all over the place. But he felt, you know, I mean, he just argued for his belief, you know, I mean, just basically all the science and all the stuff said that it works all over the place. Now, something very interesting about the Catholic Church. In the 19th century, the Catholic Church started being against evolution. And then they saw what was going on and they retreated. And today the Catholic Church believes in evolution or whatever science comes his way, and they retreated to something that is not challengeable. The Catholic Church said God could have created man any way you want it, through evolution or otherwise. And the important thing is to create that God at some point put a soul on man, okay? So you
Yeah.
can't contradict that. So there's no way you can go against the Catholic Church through science, because it basically reconciles itself with science. And I wanted to mention something. Another thing that is kind of interesting, in my opinion, is that if you take this book, and you change the word black for gay, and you could write exactly the same argument. Forget about get black out of the way and say gay. And you have exactly the same book. The question is whether you can follow the logic when you're talking about black people, because that's consistent with your belief system. But if you follow the logic, for gays, if you have a religion that said gays are bad, you can't see the logic anymore. Even though, and anyway, just the main thing, by the way, that I just wanted to say at the end, is that there is a thing, basically, it's completely clear from all the statistics I'm seeing that evangelical Christianity at this point in time is consistent with consistent with its history of providing a home and justification for racism. The other thing I think is very, very clear, that the Bible by itself is proven totally inadequate as a basis for moral behavior. It has to be complemented by something else. And then I go to what my approach, and that I learned a long time ago. My approach to ethics is based upon philosophy. You start with empathy, compassion, and a sense of fairness, and then you follow reason and empiricism wherever it goes, okay? So that's basically my lecture, and I'm finished.
Well, let me say something, Ramon.
Yeah.
I envy people who are really true believers, because life is so much easier when you are a true believer and you don't need anything. You have such a strong, as long as you don't harm anybody, it's wonderful for a person to be a true believer.
Yeah,
And I wish I could be, I am not.
I have family like that. But anyway, I didn't want to go in and but Bobby, we can talk about these on our own time if you like some more. But I think we are going to go to the book now, unless you want to do a rebuttal of what I said.
We can go on to the book.
All right.
But anyway, I got it. I appreciate Bobby letting me speak my mind. Okay, who's next? Who's got this chapter 6?
We got chapter 6.
Chapter 6, Bobby?
Yeah, we're starting with chapter 6. And so what the author does here, it's I think the author makes a couple of key points. What she talks about in here is chapter 6, the title is The Measure of Humanity. And so she talks early on in the chapter about, in a parallel universe where we could single out some other element that describes people, and if we could use that to create the same basis as skin color was used. Her whole point is that it just happens that skin color turned out to be a very convenient thing to use at the time, because that was a reality. That was what they wanted to drive. And so she talked. So what stood out? One of the quotes that was she talked a little bit about. She created a little thumbnail about where the word Caucasian came from, and she tied that back to a German who was trying to classify humanity in 1795. This person had professor of medicine had spent a lot of time studying people and looking at human skulls, and it turned out that his favorite skull, the one that he thought was the most beautiful, came from the Caucasus. So that was the origination of where the word Caucasian came from. I thought that was a chuckle point. What I think the key point of the author is, she talks about the epic, I'm going to read it, the epic mapping of the human genome and the quieter, long dreamt of the results of DNA kits ordered in time for a family reunion have shown us that race as we have come to know it is not real. It is a fiction told by modern humans for so long as it has become a sacred truth. 2 decades ago, the analysis of the human genome established that all human beings are 99.9% the same. Race is a social concept, not a scientific one. And so, this goes back to, she distinguishes between racism and caste. And this distinction that she makes is that racism actually lies below, the concept of caste actually lies beyond and below what we associate with racism. They're sort of interconnected together, but caste is much more insidious, and it's learned behavior. It's reinforced behavior, like in other chapters where they sort of model this whole thing as a play, and we all have our roles to play, and everybody needs to stay in their place. So she makes the distinction between a caste system and also racism as different levels of the same thing. And basically the point that she's trying to make in this chapter is, and so one of the quotes I liked was, like the cast on a broken arm, like the cast in a play, a caste system holds everyone in a fixed place. And, her point is that the caste system was created for the benefits of the people who were in the dominant class at the expense of everyone who was below that. And she says it's an automatic, unconscious, reflective response to expectations from a range of thousands of imaging inputs and neurological societal downloads that people affix to certain roles based upon what they look like and what they historically have been assigned, or the characteristics and stereotypes by which they have been categorized. So this is talking about how insidious. So what she's really saying is, what we think about as racism here is really a manifestation of the use of caste that lies below that. And, it's got economic origins. It's designed for the benefit of the people at the top at the expense of everyone else. That's basically the chapter. I think the author is correct. And she talks about how they're really intertwined. And part of the challenge is how we separate them, or maybe not separate them. So in a lot of ways, the example of, I'm not racist. I'm going to say that I'm colorblind. But what really lies below that is kind of the people who say that are most likely probably not Black. They probably enjoy privilege and hierarchy from where they are in this system now. And so fundamentally, those statements are at least as much about preserving their position as anything else, not accepting blame in a way by not having the discussion, which is what we learned in the last book. It preserves the status quo of the system.
Any comments? I have none. Bobby, you have any comments?
No.
I think that the chapter, there was a lot of peripheral material, but that was the key point. And, you could see that you could sort of have a sense that was coming from the earlier chapters.
Ken, do you have any comments on what he said? Or
No.
Pierre, do you have anything to add to what he said?
No.
Yeah, I just wanted to say that, Mexico, a place like Mexico also have a caste system.
Mm-hmm.
And with the people who are brown, people are brown and mestizos, and they get away with it more than the United States. If you look at the movie Roma, Roma, were about, won an Oscar or something, in which there was this woman who was a maid and was indigenous. I mentioned this before. She was the first person of Indian blood that appeared in the Mexican version of Vogue. If you go to television, and even though 90% of the Mexicans are mestizos or Indians, almost all the actors on television are white. And things like, Indian Mexicans, I'm told that many Mexicans at the bottom, they let hair in there, because Indians don't have hair. So they have mustaches and all the stuff to distance themselves from being Indians. I heard about things like they do. Some of them actually stick tubes inside their noses, so their noses look more refined, kind of a cheap man's, and there's not a lot of movement against it. And by the way, the same thing is happening in Cuba. Cuba has a tremendous amount of racism, and nobody talks about it.
Not like in the United States, Ramona. I never saw so much racism as I saw here, dear.
Yeah.
No way.
Well,
we have many black friends, and I knew many other people who had black friends. It's not the same. You cannot say.
I believe that racism in Cuba was much less. Like my mother's best friend was mulatto. But what I'm saying is, at least there's a group of people in the United States that is trying to fight racism. In Cuba, there is no group of people that are really trying to fight racism in a big way. But racism in the United States is worse than it whatever was in Cuba, much worse. And you know why? Because the United States was actually founded. In Cuba, everybody came to Cuba was Spanish. Okay, you were Spanish. So you went to Cuba, you were Spanish, and your children became Cuban. That was not a big deal. But the people who came to the United States came from all over Europe, Poland and all that. And when they came to the United States, they had to become white. That's the way the country came about. And you have the problem with slavery in the United States. In the United States, slavery was actually stopped with a war. While in other places, it was stopped by, like in Cuba, slavery was stopped by essentially compensating the slave owners. So, you didn't have that big of a problem because of that. Does that make sense?
Well, you cannot. Go ahead.
Yeah, one of the other, this is from an earlier chapter, one of the other comments, the author was talking about, she had a conversation with someone from Nigeria, and the woman said, there are no black people in Africa. And then you went on, Africans are not black, they are, and she rattled off Igbo, Yoruba, Ui. So this refers to, I guess, tribal or ancestral differences between people. They're not black. And so this is, when you want to think about, the idea that we have a system here that's been around a long time, and it's very structured, based similar to the ideas of the same type of thing that happened in India. That's probably the most concrete example. They don't, she said, we take it for gospel in the American culture. It is alien to them. She said, they don't become black until they go to America or come to the UK. It is then that they become black. So this is an example of the system that we have here imposes identities on people that they otherwise would not normally have. Yeah, and same thing.
And why do you think that happens here?
Well, because the author would argue that we have a system here that's been so embedded, it's been embedded from almost the beginning, that has created this hierarchy that obviously benefits the people at the top. It was a source of economic prosperity in the South because they had low cost or free labor. And so this system was perpetuated by the people at the top for their benefit at the expense of the people at the bottom.
I think
that's a historical, yeah, go ahead.
I think that the prejudice, the caste system is stronger here than in the UK. I mean, I had a African ethnic person at a church say to me, you're not from around here, are you? So, he felt quite at home there, it seemed. And so, but
I didn't understand.
my chapter is going to show how bad the U.S. is compared to every other place.
I don't know whether every other place, South Africa, got some problems there. But anyway, but I didn't understand your point, Bobby. The story, I didn't quite get it,
The experience of My experience in London is that blacks there are much more assimilated than here.
Well, that's what I read in places, I mean, as far as different measures of discrimination. And it's much less in England. There is discrimination, but not at the level that we have in the United States.
Bobby, don't you think my daughter lived 2 years in England, and I visited quite a few times. And I think that what happened, in my impression was that you don't see this different, you don't mix at all, like the way they mix here. What I saw, I couldn't generalize because I wasn't there such a long time. But the fact that I never saw a black person, and I went to many different places in London, and I traveled inside the country, and they just disappear. You don't see them as much as you see in this country, that they mix much more.
But there are not that many blacks in England to begin with.
Right. That's it. That's one thing. But you have many Indians in London. You have many Indians, and they are not openly discriminated, but you don't see them mixing. I never saw Indians in the restaurants that I went to. They live a different life completely from the English people. Maybe I wasn't there long enough to see what really happened, but that was my impression.
Well,
Yes.
what I have
My
read,
impression was that in London they were mixing, but I was in central London. I wasn't out in the suburbs where there was probably more division by ethnicity.
Right.
from what I read,
In
is
professional sort of mixed
what I
downtown.
read is that, London has a Muslim,
Let him finish.
Muslim mayor, okay? The mayor of London is Muslim. And from what I understand, London is extremely cosmopolitan.
Right.
And there is a tremendous distinction in London, in Great Britain, between the cities, like the United States, the big cities, and what they call flyover country. And the people who voted overwhelmingly for Brexit were the people who were in those, countryside type of thing,
Right.
And the people in London, they were very much against it. And what I read, the following thing, what I heard something very interesting. The people that are in the countryside, they don't have very much to be proud of. They're not doctors and all that, but they're very proud of being British. Just like the United States, a lot of people are proud of being white,
Yeah.
And a lot of those people, when they have, all of a sudden, they see these people coming in, their source of self-respect is eroding, when you have all these foreigners getting there and all that kind of stuff, So that's what I have read, okay?
Yeah, I'm sure that my impression was based upon the biased sample of the part of London I was in.
Maybe.
I've read many articles in The Economist about the phenomena, and it's very similar to that of the United States. Basically, there's a division around the world among the people who are everywhere people and the people who are place people. The people who are everywhere people, like statisticians, they could do that job anywhere, they whatever, and there's the people who, kind of work in one place, they've been there for a long time and all that, and, they got the little job there. And all over the world, there is this division between everywhere people and one place people.
Yeah, and I think fundamentally, if you step back and extrapolate that, what all these things point to are the same thing, which ties back to caste, that below the surface, these distinctions exist, they're created, people either agree or disagree. It's fundamentally about who's people who feel like they're, so if are you getting a fair shake? Well, if you're at the top, like the other books we've gone through, if you're at the top, hey, meritocracy is good. Oh yeah, if you've got a skill set, if you could work from home, you're kind in this economy in the US, if you can work from home, you're kind of a winner. And so, part of this, back to the concept of caste, this hierarchy is created structured for the benefits of the people in the dominant class. And so there is an economic element of it. And, you know, whatever the choice is, skin color is, you know, I think even in India, skin color was part of it. But it's all about creating a hierarchy for the benefits of the people at the top, fundamentally.
But don't you think that that's it's human nature in a way that people need to have hierarchies and for whichever reason, I think that exists anywhere, even in Africa, anywhere.
I think it's true. I think that we live in a competitive world. It's been that way. And so because of the nature of what it takes to exist in the world today, the nature that it is competitive, there's going to be some kind of an attempt to create hierarchies. It's an evolved form of competition.
I don't know. It's more than that. I think it's the fact that some people really feel superior to others, other colors or education, whatever. It's very human to be that way.
There is another phenomena that I've been reading in all kinds of places, which is fear of falling around the world. Fear of falling. They're basically the people who support Trump are not necessarily poor, but they are very insecure as far as their status is concerned, and about whether they will be eventually able to compete with elites, which to them are basically the professional classes. You know, can they really, and you know, there is a tremendous amount of fear of falling. And when you have fear of falling, you know, I mean, that's part of, but part of where I am is being white with a white privilege. Part of where I am is that I'm making this money and I see all these people from other countries, you know, making all the money, going to California and being in charge and all that. And, you know, there is a tremendous fear among those people that they will not be able to compete with the world the way it's evolving. And that's another thing. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Yes.
Ken, let's do your chapter.
My chapter was about comparing America to India.
I'm sorry, America to what?
To India.
Oh, okay.
The caste system in India.
Uh-huh.
And in lots of ways, they're nearly identical, or a lot of things that have happened. We were both colonies. There was indigenous people who were shipped off to remote locations. But the primary comparison are the Dalits or the untouchables in India compared to our blacks. They were once enslaved, and then once that ended, in fact, about the same time in both countries, then they were pretty much in a position of economic servitude. They were sharecroppers on other people's land or something. And it also talked about the levels. It says India has a very formal caste system. In addition to the Dalits, you have most of the Indian people are part of a working class, which is the next level up. And then the next level up, you have, you know, tradesmen and merchants and
then the
farmers,
military, and then which is the Katrija.
military and government officials, and then at the top are the Brahmins, the priests, and the.
And there's some, they fight each other, you know. They the Katrijas and the Brahmins, you know, Katrijas, you know, there's discussion about who's supposed to salute first and all that, you know.
Yeah, and after reading that, it might be good for you all to think too about when you grew up. You know, it says whatever levels there are in America are more blurred. For example, in India, you can tell by somebody's surname which caste they belong to, supposedly. for example, the Patels that own so many hotels and subways and things like that in this country come from that working class of working people at the down at the bottom. But uh, my wife and I recently did our DNA analysis with Ancestry.com, and then we entered our family trees, and it connected us to a lot of others. And my family tree and some branches of it can be traced all the way back to 1600. And it's amazing how homogeneous it is. I mean, my people have all been small farmers. They didn't own their own land and have other people working for them. They owned a little piece of property and worked it themselves by and large. That would be how you would describe them.
How do you know that, Ken? How do you know that?
Because
Because I have my family tree to look at, and Ancestry.com actually has
I did that too.
census records and draft notices and all sorts of things that you can look at these individuals. And in my DNA, there's not any evidence at all of Native American blood, black blood. It's all, basically from Ireland and Scotland and Northern England. And when it traces it back, it will tell you, Andrew Jackson is your third cousin 7 times removed, or Abraham Lincoln. There's not one plantation owner in there, or any, no Washingtons or Jeffersons or anybody like that. And I got to thinking about the community I grew up in. I remember my sister had this boy she liked at school, and my dad just flat told her, no, you can't date him because his last name is such and such, and that's, we don't do that.
Are you Jewish by any chance?
No.
Because the Jews are exactly what you're describing.
Yeah.
Ken,
And it's
Ken,
the same way going up. I'm sure there were plenty of parents that would have told their daughters they couldn't have dated me either. But
I didn't understand. You were told that some people with certain last names you should not date.
yeah. There are families in our area called Melungeons, and this person had a Melungeon last name, and my dad just flat said, no, you
What
can't.
are Melanchons?
I think
What class?
they were probably who knows, Ramona. I think they were probably mixed race of runaway slaves and Native Americans, and maybe some white blood in there. They're dark skinned. They're a little darker than most of the rest of the people of this area.
This time, David Brooks at one time wrote a column based on a book that actually said that there is more prediction about how you feel politically from what part of Europe, England you came from.
Yeah.
And there is actually more recent stuff.
Yeah.
Very interesting, Ken. We also had we did the same thing you did, and there's no secrets. We're Jews from forever. Our ancestors are very Jewish from Spain and from Portugal and from even Morocco. So I am no way I can deny that I'm Jewish. Well, I don't want to deny it. But
Yeah, Vera, I don't know if you were here the night that Chuck Noon shared his DNA and his wife's DNA with us.
no,
But Chuck was kind of like me. He was kind of a mixture of Scots Irish and that part of Europe.
uh-huh.
But his wife was Jewish, and it was just 100%. I forget the adjective, something Jewish. So.
You do look like you have a lot of Neanderthal on you.
Yeah, but I would have sworn before I got mine back that there would have been Native American
All right.
by
Interesting.
DNA. But
Why you say that? You don't have anything that I would say you're
well,
native.
because my ancestors have lived since the colonial period among Native Americans and everything. So I would have assumed somewhere along the way that there would have been some interbreeding there. But
Well, you English
apparently,
people are the same as the Jews. You don't mix with other people. That's the
Yeah.
reality.
yeah. So I guess I'm supporting your thesis that you said earlier. It may not be that people are just doing it to retain economic advantage. You know, there may be something innately an innate tendency for people to do that, to figure out where they belong on the hierarchy.
Right.
Yeah, I don't know if I told you, Babia, that I am 1% Cuban Indian.
Yeah.
And it turns out that people thought that it was actually, do you people hear about the story they did about Caribbean Indians?
Uh-uh.
It looks like, he said, you know, I mean, the father Caste said that they killed like 1 million, but it looks like the more likely population of the Caribbean of Indians was about 10, 20,000. And the reason seems to be that they found out that Indians that came from the islands and Cuba, they were related. They were very closely related. So it looks like they canoe from one to the other. And places like Cuba, 4% of the Cuban population genes are Indians. They thought they would actually disappear. And in Puerto Rico, something like 12%. But you know, that was an incredible study recently.
So you're 1% Indian, you say?
I am 1% Cuban Indian.
That's interesting.
And I told
When-
people what happened there when the Spaniards came to Cuba. They didn't kill all the Indians. They just took all the women. They didn't have any women with them, so they went ahead and went to the Indian women and made them their wives. And you know, basically, and the male Indians just died. They didn't have any wives. And over time, you know, then Spanish women start coming and all of that. So basically, Indians disappear in Cuba through I don't know how you say it in English, but you know, basically that's what happened. You know, they start marrying and marrying and marrying. But at the beginning, there was a lot of Los Spaniards that picked up Indian wives. I think in the United States they used to call them squats. No, how do you call an Indian woman? A squat?
Squaw. Yeah, squaw. Yep. I used to, whenever I want to pull my
Sure if
wife.
that's considered a nice thing to call them.
Yeah, I don't know. When I used to want to, occasionally I'll get in the mood to pull my wife's chain a little bit. And my father-in-law was from Georgia. So whenever I get in the mood to pull my wife's chain, we talk about background and family history. I said, you have to know that Georgia was part of the founding of Georgia was a prison colony. I said, so what that means is you got a little convict in your family tree there. And that used to get her going. But my wife, and I don't know where she got the information from. She's actually got a little bit of Native American, but you know, most of my wife is Italian. So my father-in-law was, you know, from the woods in Georgia. Maybe he had convict in the family tree. He went to New York and married an Italian. So that's where my wife came from. But I love to pull her chain about that. Yeah, you got some convict in your family tree. That's down in Georgia. I don't know what else might have been swinging in that tree. And we haven't done the analysis yet, but someday we're probably going to do that just for the laughs involved. But you know, to Ken's point, and I think it's absolutely, it's a very interesting point. In that is that I think for a lot of us, we generally don't. I really believe that all of us have certain capacities that express over time. I don't, you know, this is just my anecdotal view of the world. So I had a friend, someone I know who's in Pakistan who loved to do a lot with photography. And one day I said, okay, so you have to tell me who it is in your family background. Who is it that was the photographer? She started thinking about it. He goes, yeah, so-and-so. And so he had someone, I think it was one of his grandfathers, was an avid photographer, may have been professional. I said, see, you've got that interest, at least in part, because of this family orientation. And, you know, I wound up doing engineering, and I've always asked myself, gee, I wonder, who the engineers were in the family tree. Because I think these talents tend to be expressed over time. There is some genetics involved that I finally found out talking to my, one of my grandmothers at one point, that her family origin was in New York, and that part of the family was engineers that came over from Holland. And so, I think we get an expression of things that, even intergenerational, that come back to they reflect some inner strength or some inner talent. So small parcel farming and the ability to connect with the land, that's a talent. That is something that a lot of people can't do. And so it doesn't surprise me to hear what Ken has said about, when they do the analysis. And I have a friend, she's British, but her family has been farmed for multiple generations, and she loves the outdoors. She's a great gardener. And so we have tendencies that come to the surface because we have talents in certain areas. I really believe that. So Raymond, you must have some mathematicians, some engineers or scientists in your family because of
I don't have anybody.
Your chosen profession.
No, I don't have
know.
anybody. You see, we are merchants and ranchers.
Yeah.
And I was the first person who completed I have an aunt that almost graduated as a lawyer. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
And everybody else, in Cuba, you didn't make any money by going to a profession. You basically made your money by, a certain age, work for somebody, somebody who had a business, and you were trusted because you came from a gold-plated family. Basically, your wealth was your family. If you had nobody, no women ever cheated on their husband. Nobody ended up being a drunk. Nobody ended up, basically, they were basically a family that the man sleep in the house, didn't have a mistress. If you were that kind of family, they trusted you. They trusted you, and some rich guy needed to open a business, and they would hire you to kind of be there. Eventually you learn, and then you end up. So my family, basically people knew how to write and multiply and stuff like that very, very well, very, very well. They didn't have spelling mistakes or anything like that, but after that, no more.
Yeah, you and I are both outliers in our own families, I'm sure, Ramon.
Well, no, not really, because remember that you and I have a difference. The big difference is that we were, in my case, they took my family and took it completely out of Cuba, okay? And I told you about the 7 brothers and sisters the 6 brothers and sisters on my father's side. They all left, and 6 out of the 7, they came out. So the one thing that we didn't know is we had a good sense of how you make money. It took 10 minutes for us to come to the United States to realize that the way you make money in the United States was going to college. Okay, you couldn't get a girlfriend. When you came from Miami, you could not get a girlfriend unless you were working and studying. Unless you were working and studying, you couldn't get a girlfriend. They would say, the women like my mother would say, that's a good boy. He works and he's studying, and you have to be.
Are you Jewish? Are you Jewish? Because the Jews have the same problem.
Well, we're small town. Not small town, medium-sized town Cubans. We didn't have that many people with professions and all that, but the minute we came, and then all of a sudden these things they came to Miami, and they saw the people were making all the money were the people who were doctors and lawyers, and they came to the United States and they could go in and work. And then this rumor came out, the only thing they cannot take from you is what you have in your head. And, that was the story. And that happened overnight. I mean, total change in our, now Cuba had a different thing. In Cuba, even people like my mother respected culture. I mean, being able to, know about literature and geography and travel and art, no matter how low you were, I mean, no low, I mean, my
Yep.
family respected that.
Bobby, could you tell us about the Nazi?
Hmm.
Yeah. Wow. This was an eye-opening chapter.
It was.
The Nazis and the acceleration of caste. And so she begins in June of 1934, and it's the Nazis have begun to consolidate power, and they're meeting to discuss how to essentially separate out Jews from the rest of society. And they are looking at other countries, and they consider South Africa. They considered it, I can't remember what the other country was, but they concluded that the US was the model for how to do it. And they just marveled at how there could be an air of respectability associated with the US and yet have such mistreatment of a segment of their population. And so they looked at the laws involving racial separation. So there's 17 people that are meeting at this in June of 1934, and they're looking at race laws in the US, and the Plessy versus Ferguson ruling by the Supreme Court is one of the things they discuss. Here I'll read a short bit. A young Nazi intellectual named Herbert Kyer was tasked with compiling a table of US race laws and was confounded by the length to which America went to segregate its population. He made note that by law in most southern states, white children and colored children are sent to different schools, and that most states further demand that race be given in birth certificates, in licenses, and death certificates. He discovered that many American states even go so far as to require by statute segregated facilities for coloreds and whites in waiting rooms, train cars, sleeping cars, streetcars, buses, steamboats, even in prisons and jails. The tax rolls were segregated in Arkansas. Anyway, they're just marveling at all the legislation by states. And there are some that are very hardcore that are pushing for extreme measures to segregate the Jews, like America is segregating blacks from whites. And they quote a couple of what's the word, eugenics researchers. One of them, I guess, is very popular there, but they, in the end, they can't be as extreme as the U.S. They say in the U.S. there's this sense in which if there's just one drop of African blood, then you are black. And they said there's no way, they just thought that is going to denigrate the Aryan blood. You know, it can't be as bad as that. And so they came up with the rule that if you have 3 Jewish grandparents, then you're Jewish, or if you have 2 Jewish grandparents and you associate with Jews by marriage or in some other way, then we're going to classify you as Jewish.
Bobby, do they mention that we had in the United States far more advanced eugenics than anywhere in the world, sterilizing people in prisons and blacks and all kinds of things? Do they mention that?
What they do, they quote 2 people, and I don't know that they talk about the actual practice of eugenics in the US as much as they just stress the words of these 2 men.
The United States was ahead of anybody in the world by far in the use of eugenics to sterilize. I mean, lots of women, poor women, had a problem. They were sterilized. All kinds of people were
They
sterilized.
didn't kill these people, Ramon, like the Nazis did. They didn't kill them. It's a difference.
Well, it's interesting that they did not kill in the masses. The scope of what the Nazis did later certainly surpasses what was done in the U.S. But as far as the laws, and this meeting that was described in Chapter 8 involved, it was in 1934, and it was several years later that the Nuremberg laws came out. But they were, for instance, they said, surely the U.S. isn't actually criminalizing all the behavior that the laws say. For instance, it said that interracial marriage could be in, maybe it was Virginia, could be penalized, could be convicted and serve up to 10 years in prison. And they just thought, well, surely, these laws are not actually being enforced. But to realize that the Nazis looked to the U.S. for guidance into how to stigmatize and separate out.
I understand they admire, for example, what they did in the United States, where they took the Indians from the Cherokees, sent them out there, and one of
Yes.
the, I mean, how they killed most of them, and then the few that were shipped them somewhere else, and probably they start killing the Jews because they didn't have any territory to send the people. Because what they really wanted to do at the beginning, they wanted to send the Jews somewhere else in the world, but they never got anybody to. I mean, Jews were discriminated all over the world. Nobody wanted the Jews, okay, including Cuba. And
No, I never felt that.
Vera, you know about the budget of the dam, that there was this refugee ship?
Yes, I
I
know.
mean,
I know the story.
let
But
the-
in my time, I never felt any
so
discrimination.
the big deal is that there were not that many Jews, and we do have a rule that
10,000 Jews, that's all.
yeah, when there's so few. By the way, Bobby, did you ever see that? Did you ever see that that thing on the? Did you ever see this Netflix thing where he said "Genius of the Modern World"? You see that?
Yeah, I remember you mentioning it. I have not watched it.
If you really want to watch the one about Nietzsche, because what the book says is that what the Nazis wanted to do was turn Christianity on its head. The big idea is that they use now. Nietzsche said the criticism of the Western world that Christianity was overly concerned with the poor and the weak and the sick and all kinds of stuff. And Nietzsche said that that's wrong. You really got to go ahead and actually worry about the creators, the people who did all kinds of stuff like that. And then supposedly misinterpreting Nietzsche, the Nazis actually said, we're not going to worry anymore about the weak. We're going to do everything for the strong. So it was actually a 180-degree rejection of Christianity that the Nazi was. It was actually the opposite, total antithesis to Christianity. Do you know that, no?
Well, I mean, as you say it, yeah. I mean,
Yeah, take the
Well, you know, and I think they
take
all,
the
they,
core ideas of Christianity and turn them on its head, and you end up with Nazism.
well, it's also very clear, at least the little bit of Nietzsche that I've read, it's very clear that the Nazis tapped, Nietzsche, talked about the overman and the underman, and they obviously tapped that. And for them, the underman were the Jews. But,
Well,
so
here's what I think.
they borrowed from Nietzsche wherever they felt it was useful.
Well, here's what they seems to going on. According to this thing, Nietzsche would have hated Nazism and anti-Semitism, but the sister of Nietzsche, after he died, she took control of his library, and she started releasing things here and there and all of that to actually create fundamentally a core for the Nazi. But according to this series, if Nietzsche had actually gotten up there, for example, he criticized Christianity as emphasizing the poor too much, but didn't say ignore the poor. He just said you also have to worry about the creative people. He didn't say go ahead and kill the weak, But the Nazis took it completely all the way. Then forget about the poor. We want to worry about he supposedly was his sister who turned Nietzsche's work into the foundations for Nazism.
well, it was a disturbing chapter.
Well, it's terrible, and
I mean, because I think I mentioned this a week or two ago, the idea that we would, anytime you want an example of moral absolutes and the problem of just saying, let each culture decide what is okay, you can't criticize another culture, is, well, just bring up the Nazis and their extermination of Jews and other groups. And now to find that they were looking to the U.S. for justification, and how just admiring, the segregation and mistreatment in the U.S.
Bobby, does this chapter go over what you said later, that the difference between the United States and Germany is how the Germans got rid of Nazism? They took the kids to the concentration camps. They took the kids to the concentration camps and all of that. They really did an effort.
That's not a part of
Get rid of it. Well, that's going to be later in the book. How the way
Yeah,
the Germans.
That's good. There is in Montgomery, there's a museum now, and I think that would be worth the trip to go and see.
About what? What's in the museum?
I'm trying to think of somebody Johnson that did the documentary about Just Mercy. What is the? I'll look it up.
Yeah.
One of the things that, I have a friend that is kind of, many white people, poor white people are completely convinced that there's tremendous hate for white people. And, I keep telling this guy that there are many groups of different white people in the United States. There's not just the poor whites. There is educated whites, and there's all kinds of But one thing that Ken and I have actually talked for many, many years is that the only group of people you can make a joke about are poor whites. I mean, Ken told me about, Ken was telling me one time about this cartoon where they have this hillbilly with no teeth, you would never be able to do that. And this guy looks at that humor and he uh, correctly, uh, I guess he said, well, there's a lot of hate against whites, and he's got a point. But the way I see it is the way it works is the following: liberals understand why a black person is poor. So, well, you've been discriminated and all that. When they look at a poor white, they say, why didn't you don't have anything, you don't have any discrimination. The fact that you're poor is because you didn't study, you didn't do this, you didn't that. You have no excuse to be poor. And I think that really makes liberals more cruel towards poor whites than they would be against blacks or Indians or whatever, Does that make sense, Ken?
Yeah, makes a
Yeah.
makes a lot of sense. Yeah,
The name of the museum, National Memorial for Peace and Justice in the Legacy Museum. So that's the name of it. The Legacy Museum from Enslavement to Mass Incarceration.
yeah, Ramona, I agree with what you said at the beginning, that orthodoxy is a problem, but it's not unique to one group of people. They are people who claim to be scientific and open-minded, who are as orthodox as you could possibly imagine. Milton Friedman would be a good example. And the other thing I would say, there are people who won't admit that there are questions that science can address. In other words, how do you measure a pound of forgiveness or a gallon of compassion? And that's fundamentally what's important. So you're not.
Well, Bob, again, I agree with you. I mean, a lot of the people that I know of are Orthodox. They're definitely Orthodox about
There's
climate.
different kinds of you can be Orthodox and whatever. And all that means is my mind's made up. I know the truth. Don't bother me with.
Well, orthodoxy is what this book is saying, that the problem is not conservatism. Conservatism, the way we have it, as a descendant of Edmund Burke and David Hume, was very much part of the Enlightenment project. Basically, you wanted to improve human happiness through the use of reason. The difference between a liberal, a progressive, and a conservative is that a conservative is somebody who's really cautious about changing, while the people that are progressive are people who kind of dare a little bit more. And that is the reason why there's a lot of empirical evidence that for democracy to work well, you need a right of center group and a right of left, a left to center group, because they talk about change, and one is very careful and the other one is so, but they argue within the Enlightenment project where they use reason to get there. Orthodoxy is different. You have a belief that is true, and then you go out and try to ram it down the throat of everybody else. And the first person you try to ram it through is yourself. You end up reading nothing but what confirms what you believe. And if anything doesn't confirm what you believe,
Throw it out.
You look at what it says about motivated reasoning, it's related to the confirmation bias. And the book also talks about something called the desirability bias, which is where people just see what they desire to be true. And that's every one of us has this problem. And one of this book, what it does is say, hey, get rid of that. Don't start being proud of changing your mind. And then Kahneman said, the only time I'm sure I learned something is when I learned that I was mistaken.
Yeah.
That's the only time, you find out you're mistaken. You're sure you learned something. At other times, you may have learned something or not.
Yeah.
So that book is really, really nice, and I believe it's very nice. Well, God, Bobby, I do have a challenge, one question. I believe that you take this book and you take the word black out and put gay. And from a comment that I heard from Paul, I think Paul is a little bit prejudiced against gays too, Am I correct?
What do you mean by prejudice against gays?
Well, I believe a gay person is just like everybody else. As long as they support their family and, I don't care they're gay or not, okay? I have, my niece is gay, my, a second cousin is gay, and I see absolutely no difference. The two of them are kind, good, parents, good brothers, good sons, good everything. And I see absolutely no difference between them and the people that are heterosexual. That's what I am, okay? I see no
So
moral.
honestly, I've sailed around the world, and it doesn't take a rocket scientist to realize that if you're out in the middle of the ocean for months at a time and the only people out there are other men on the ship, there might be a few gay people. That's never bothered me. These are all choices.
Now, Bobby has
Go
ahead.
there's stereotypes, and we all have to overcome the biases that we've been taught. So for me, one of the really challenging biases, because I grew up in the 60s, and one of the very hard things for me to accept was interracial relationships. And it's not that I honestly believe they're bad. I have a bias that was in my head at the time, that maybe I won't even say disapproving. It was not what I considered normal. And the first time I came face to face with that, I'm like, wow, this was not what I expected to see. With someone said, "Oh, I'll go get my wife." We were chatting. You'll have to meet my wife, and they were an interracial couple, and I was just it was not what I expected, and I guess at the time I was a little shocked, because it's not the expectation that I normally have, and that's where I really had to examine that expectation and really evaluate it. And for me, it was a challenge and a struggle to overcome. Honestly, I guess I would say it was a bias against that.
Okay, I am guilty myself personally of having outruled a couple of women that had Indian blood as prospective wives. I didn't do it consciously, but I basically, inside my mind, I said, no way I'm going to marry this person because he's got black, kind of brown, she's kind of brown, okay? So I done that, okay, yeah, already. And, I had all the stories that I wasn't like that, but the reality is that I did do that when the rubber hits the road, okay?
Well, when I grew up, it was not considered proper form to marry someone even just outside of your religion. That's how, the kind of stuff I had in my head, that was just not considered normal behavior. So for me, that was kind of verboten, and everything else beyond that wasn't really even in my head. And, like I said, for me, getting over some of these deeply ingrained biases, it's a challenge, and the only way that, we call them implicit biases or whatever, things you're not necessarily aware of. The only way you can really attempt to overcome them is to recognize and be exposed to them. And if you understand that you have an issue, then what you know is, when you're dealing around that issue, you have to be very careful of the choice of words you use, the things you say, because if you have an innate weakness or concern, until you can beat that, you can overcome that, you have to recognize that if you're not careful, your selection of words or your implied meanings won't be good.
If I look inside my soul right now, and Susanna died, and I were to date somebody, it would come to my mind as a shock if that person was not completely white. You know, I would fight it, but it's still there. It's still there, and you know, I think it's better. But I was thinking about right there, being honest with myself, and I would have to say that's wrong, but the prejudice is inside me. Okay, the devil is inside me in that area right now. Now, Bobby has a loophole as far as gay is concerned. And, you know, his loophole is the following. I think being gay is wrong, but I don't think it's right to discriminate against him.
Yeah, I don't see the loophole. I mean, it is, there are lots of things that we as people do that are not right. And yet, it is, we are forgiven. I mean, a follower of Jesus is forgiven for what they have done wrong. And one of Jesus's parables was about the guy that owed an enormous sum of money, and one, you know, he gets forgiven that amount, and then he goes out and he grabs somebody who owes him a little bit of money and grabs him by the throat and puts him in jail. And that's a picture of how absurd it is for us to essentially
Bobby,
not,
your position is very hard. I mean, you can do it because you're smart and all that, but a lot of people, when they hear about something like that, they end up hating gays. You know, I mean, they can't tell the difference between hating the sinner and hating the sin. You know, they cannot really do that. And, you know, that is a big problem.
well, and I think that, Paul, your comment about interracial marriage, it's certainly not something that I would have been exposed to early on. And it's something that I think I'm comfortable with it now. I have friends who are, you know, interracial marriages. And it seems it's a help to have.
You know, I'm totally comfortable too. The problem is that I'm looking within myself. If I ended up in a situation with something inside my head come in and say, don't marry somebody who's mixed, you know, and that's still there, you know?
Well, you're talking about blacks. Now, let me ask you a question. I am Jewish. What do you think about being a Jew?
Oh, yeah, that's a great question. No, I have a comment. I'm gonna have a comment.
Yeah.
One of the things that
I'm a nice Jew, but there are not so many, not all the Jews are nice, like not all the Catholics or the Protestants are nice. So just a regular person.
I think that one of the things I admire about the Jewish people that I know, is they're very practical.
Don't give me the explanation. Give me the bad part. I want to.
I don't have a bad part. You know, for me, I've never bought into that stuff. But, you know, what I see are people who are engaged and very practical. And so if I was really in a tight spot and I had to pick friends to get the best advice from, I'd probably go to some of my Jewish friends because I know I'm going to get a practical answer. But, you know, back to the.
I am not a practical Jew.
Well, here's a problem.
Yeah, but most of the Jews that I know are pretty practical.
Well, you are generalizing and putting the Jews into
Well, yeah, that's all I can do.
It's not right.
I only known a bad Jew. I mean, one Jew destroyed my first marriage. I don't know if I ever told you that. I never could.
No, I think the people who are married are the ones that destroy the marriages, not somebody else.
My first marriage was destroyed because I was a graduate student and my wife was a graduate student, and there was this guy by the name of Naftali, which is an Israeli Jew, and he was my wife's co-major professor. And he started asking, he wanted to have my wife, have sex with him. And, as a result of that, he essentially poisoned the marriage because I wasn't, my wife has worked 10 years to have a PhD, and she saw her only way out to be that because I was graduating. She didn't know what to do between getting her PhD and my marriage. And at that time, I thought that she should be categorically go for me, and she was just trying to ban the situation, just do this, do that. And, for years after that, I tried to save my marriage because, my marriage, but every time, that just kept coming as the situation came out, and every time she justified herself that she had to have the PhD, and that was too radical because she wasn't considered, and I felt that she should be totally loyal to me, and that a marriage started very, very well after that incident was poisoned, and eventually I tried to save it, but I couldn't. So that was the only, that was my experience with a Jewish guy.
I don't mean to cut this off, but I have to jump.
Yeah.
It's been great chatting with everybody. And
Yeah.
I know you're going to send out an email. Just let me know what my next chapter is. I have
Why
to
don't we do
jump.
it right now? Why don't we do it right now?
Okay.
Chuck's already got number 9.
Okay. Who's got 10?
Okay, I gotta write it down.
Okay. Put me down. Put me down. You going to do 10?
I'll do 10.
Okay. Put me down for 11. I got
Write
to
it down.
jump.
Let me write it down. Who does 10?
Bobby,
Bobby. And I got 11, Ramon. I got to jump.
Don't put me down for anyone, for any chapter,
No, it's
please.
okay.
Have a good night.
11 is what? 11 is
Me,
Paul.
Paul.
And you want to do 12, Ken?
Okay.
And I'm not going to do any because I don't want to read the book again. Is that okay?
yep, that's okay.
Anyway, I'm kind of
That's
proud
a
that
sad
I'm-
story, Ramon.
Huh?
I had never heard what you just told about your marriage.
I'm kind of proud myself because I actually, I'm kind of proud that I was able to relate that. Because for many years, every time I tried to relate it, I would get all this pain that I could never admit it. But it was very easy to tell you about it. And, so that's a sign of progress.
Yeah.
But that was my first marriage was actually, that's why I've been, I told you before that my wife kept her both wives kept their last names because I was very, very pro-women. And every time I hear these people talking about harassing of women and all that, I tell them, they're not really harassing the women, they're harassing the family. Suppose there's a woman out there who's being harassed and she's married and all that, and she needs some money to support the family, and somebody start doing that kind of shit. He's going after the husband, he's going after the kids, I think it's much worse than people who go after women in a position of power. I think that they're really much worse than the media says they are. Because they emphasize the harm to the women, but they don't emphasize the harm to the family structure.
Yeah.
So anyway.
Yeah.
So Bobby, the next time I'd like you at some point to tell me the difference between this book, Caste. If you took that book and just replaced black for gay, I would say there was a one-to-one correspondence between both arguments. And I'd like to know at some point, why is there a difference? Why is there a difference between a book, exactly the same book with the word gay, and exactly the same book, with the word, why are they not the same book? And maybe you can tell me the next time.
Okay, I gotta go, Ramon.
Okay,
Okay.
bye.
Not Vera.
Bye. Good seeing you all.
Stay there, still there for a minute. I think what you enjoyed tonight?
Yeah, very nice. I like these people.
Well,
They're,
it's very easy that we don't have to. It's very easy that we don't have to have a book. You know, we can just listen. I enjoy much more than when I was actually leading the discussions.
well, uh, you're not reading, but you contribute a lot to the discussion, Ramon.
I know, but at least I know I'm not the one. I mean, there is a reason for the people to really be leaders. Okay,
Right. So
and,
they participate more. They
and I
participate.
really like the idea of having each one of them uh, pick a chapter and tell me how they see that chapter because I learned how they think about it, and I really like that.
Yeah. Okay. Sometimes you tell me more about your first wife. Okay.
Well, I mean, it's not worth it.
No. Okay.
Well, I mean, I can tell you. I mean, I don't. I mean, I just noticed right now that I really had no. Uh, that incident destroyed my career. I was one of the top graduates in the
Who
nation.
destroyed your career?
This incident,
Oh.
because I had 10 papers in top journals at the time. And when this happened, there was a year and a half where I couldn't do any research or anything like that. But I was the kind of person who was given jobs at MIT, Yale, and that period was so traumatic for me that I couldn't do research, couldn't do anything. So, I mean, that actually had implications. It destroyed my marriage, destroyed my career. I mean, I didn't get as far as I could have gotten because of this incident. Okay.
I'm sorry to hear that.
Well, I mean, right now, I mean, it didn't turn out that bad, no. So, I mean, I'm comfortable with it.
Mhm. No, but I mean, not now, but when it happened, it must have been very hard.
It was unbelievable. I had nightmares all the time, and traumatized. I wanted to kill the guy. I mean,
Really.
well, I mean, it was, I mean, imagine un cubano, que de momento le empiecen a joder a la mujer, lo quieren matar, ¿no? Es lo que hacen los cubanos, ¿no?
Right.
Pues mira cómo haya sido eso.
Yeah, I'm sorry.
Pero bueno, no, ya, pero ya, pues eso no me molesta ya, mano, no me interesa, que es bueno que no tengo ese
Right.
problema en mi mente ya.
Yeah.
Pero, bueno, entonces un día vamos a hacer lo siguiente, Vera, ahora no porque ya es tarde, pero hay una cosa que te voy a dar, un artículo, voy a coger un artículo de Edsal y lo vamos a discutir.
¿Ya lo tienes o lo vas a buscar?
Yo todos los artículos de Edsal los tengo, te puedo
¿Qué
explicar.
es lo que te atrae tanto de Edsal?
El tipo no me dice su opinión, sino me da la opinión de una pila de gente que son expertos. Cuando yo me leo el libro de los artículos de Edsal, yo no sé eso lo que dice, no es lo que piensa Edsal, me explica lo que piensa una pila de gente, ¿entiendes?
Ajá, ajá.
Entonces, mira, déjame compartir la pantalla para que tú veas, por ejemplo, mira. Mira, este es el artículo de Edsal, yo los tengo así, ¿ves? Entonces, la parte importante. Mira lo que dice aquí, por ejemplo, aquí. Just ahead of the election, the majority, 55% of white evangelicals and the plurality, 47% Republicans, said that they saw Trump as being called God.
Yeah, I read that. Yeah.
So, I take these things, I mean, I take those.
But I read that, y when I read things like that, I ask myself, where am I living? How can
We could take Vera every week and discuss, he only writes one paper a week.
Yeah, I read that article. And when I read that, I thought that, I mean, are we a backward country? What's going on? How can people think like that?
Hey, Vera, do you want to have it one time a week where we discuss an Edsal article?
Okay, well, yeah, I guess we can do that.
Okay, why don't we go ahead and that? That way you keep telling me you want to talk with me, so the best way to do it is to kind of formalize it. So, I mean, 6 o'clock is a good time for me.
No, not for me.
What's a good time for you?
About 8 o'clock. Is that too late?
Well, the problem is that I'm usually with my mother from 7:30 to,
Ah, well, then no. Well, maybe during the weekend we can, well, I don't know, when is a good time for you? At 6 o'clock I can because it's cuando yo como con León, usually at that time. I eat with León at that time. So,
los domingos yo me reúno a las 3. ah, ah,
well, on Sundays I have, on Saturday I have a Zoom with the Israelis, and Sunday we have the book club, but that's only, you know, it's amazing. There's many stupid things I do, but tú en la tarde no puedes. Dice, well, tell me again when it's convenient
a
for
la
you.
tarde yo puedo hacerlo también, si tú quieres. A las 4 de la tarde lo puedo hacer. O,
Yeah.
o a las 5 también.
Yeah, de 5 a 6 I can do it. That would be a good time.
¿Pero qué día de la semana?
Okay, we meet with these people. Today is what? Today is Friday. We can do it Tuesday, Wednesday, something like that.
¿Quieres lo
¿Qué
que-
es lo que vamos a discutir? ¿Edsel?
Yo creo que así es más fácil, ¿entiendes? Porque él tiene siempre un artículo interesante toda la semana. Y si queremos hablar otra cosa, podemos hablar, pero por lo menos tenemos o algo con que empezar, ¿entiendes?
Ya. Entonces, ¿qué día quieres hacerlo?
A mí me da más o menos, déjeme mirar mi calendario, pero a mí me parece que cualquier día está igual. El lunes no puedo, porque tengo a los Asperger, pero
Ya.
el martes puedo.
Ramón, ¿qué es lo que tú haces con los Aspergers?
Simplemente le doy compañía ahora. Me di cuenta que no
¿Le
lo
enseñas algo, los guías?
Yo hacía eso antes, pero no funcionaba tan bien. Los Asperger que siguen en el grupo son gente que más o menos funcionan, ¿entiendes? Los que están solos, ¿entiendes? Entonces yo veo una película con ellos, veo cosas, hablamos un poquito de música, ¿entiendes? Nada más que es una cosa completamente social en este momento.
Ajá.
¿Me explico?
Ya.
Pero yo puedo, déjeme buscar el calendario un momentico a ver qué dice aquí esto.
Entonces, ¿qué tú quieres discutir? ¿Los artículos de Edsel?
Ahora vamos a crear el momento, espérate. Ahora vamos a hacer el schedule. Y te puedo mandar el artículo de Excel si quieres empezamos con este.
Bueno, no sé si a qué hora dijimos, a las 5. Yo preferiría a las 8 sometime, si se puede.
Pero estoy con mi
Mejor.
mamá normalmente.
¿Cómo?
Estoy con mi mamá.
Estás con tu mamá todos los días.
El problema es, pero puedo hacerlo a las 4 o a las 5 de la tarde cualquier día.
Que a esa hora yo estoy preparando la cena y es, bueno,
Y a las 4 de la tarde,
como a las 4 would be better.
o a las 3:30 también podría ser.
No, a las 4. 4, de 4 a 5.
Un momentico, déjame buscar una cosa aquí para ponerlo en la... Podemos discutir otra cosa si queremos, pero empezamos con el artículo de Excel, ¿entiendes?
Ya. ¿Cuál es que quieres discutir?
Bueno, a lo mejor hay uno más nuevo, pero yo leí el de...
¿Qué día lo vamos a hacer? Podemos decidir si lo vamos a discutir.
No, vamos a hacerlo ahora porque así terminamos. Espérate. Te voy a mandar el artículo de Excel que yo propongo que sea el primero, ¿ok?
Ok.
Y te lo voy a mandar, que yo lo tengo subrayado. ¿Me explico?
Ya.
Ok, ahora mismo te lo voy a mandar. Espérate, Bueno, primero vamos a hacer el momento, primero voy a hacer la fecha que lo vamos a hacer. Primero tengo aquí ok, yo lo puedo hacer el martes, lo puedo hacer el miércoles y lo puedo hacer el martes y el martes o el miércoles es el mejor día para mí. También puedo hacerlo el jueves.
¿Qué tal si el miércoles?
¿No quieres hacer los miércoles a las 3 de la tarde?
O quieres el jueves. Martes no me gusta mucho.
¿Martes?
Pero en martes no, pero miércoles o jueves,
¿Te gusta más el miércoles o el jueves?
me da igual, cualquiera.
Pues vamos a hacerlo el miércoles. ¿A qué hora? ¿A las 4?
Ah, ya.
Ok, entonces yo te voy a mandar ahora. Quédate ahí un
Entonces
momentico.
lo vamos a hacer la semana que viene.
Y bueno, todos los jueves a la... Espérate un momentico, lo voy a dejar ponerlo
No,
aquí.
nos dijimos los miércoles, ¿no? O los jueves.
Miércoles. Vamos a empezar los miércoles a las 4 de la tarde, ¿no?
Right.
Y podemos hablar lo que nos dé la gana, pero empezamos con el artículo de los miércoles a las 4, ¿ok?
Ok.
Y después te mando el
¿Quieres
link.
incluir a alguien más?
No, nosotros dos nada más. Para nosotros dos nada más, ¿por qué carajo vamos a poner a nada más nadie? Lo complicamos, más agradable que lo hagamos nosotros dos.
Ok.
Podemos hablar en español, podemos hablar como de la gana. Entonces, lo que voy a hacer es lo siguiente, mira, te voy a mandar este artículo, te lo voy a mandar ahora mismo, ¿ok?
Ok.
Porque y a pesar de que tú lo tienes, yo lo tengo subrayado, ¿entiendes?
Ajá.
Yo lo tengo subrayado porque yo te lo voy a mandar subrayado porque la discusión, para que sea más fácil, podemos empezar, como diría yo, empezamos cogiendo
¿De qué habla en este artículo este hombre? ¿Esto?
¿tú dices?
¿De qué es el artículo?
Ahora te lo voy a enseñar, espérate. Espérate, un segundo.
Hay que hacer cosas porque la vida está muy aburrida, si no.
Bueno,
Me gusta la gente de este grupo, Ramón.
ahora después. Ok, te mandé el artículo ahora, pero mira cómo lo vamos a discutir, ¿ok? Yo tengo el artículo de Etsal aquí, ¿ok? Te lo voy a enseñar ahora. Y son larguísimos, pero yo de todas maneras cojo los artículos de Etsal y les subrayo las partes importantes, ¿entiendes? ¿Tú ves eso?
Ya.
Yo subrayo las partes importantes, entonces podemos brincar de los highlights a otros highlights y vamos así a través del artículo, ¿entiendes? Y así tenemos una estructura.
Pero tú dices nada más que discutir lo que tú tienes highlighted. ¿Tú crees que es lo más importante?
Pero
Well, I read the whole article anyhow.
empezando por ahí. Yo me imagino que tú puedes encontrar algo para highlight también tú que te interese.
No, a mí me gusta que me digan lo que tengo que hacer.
No, lo que yo he hecho simplemente son las partes que son importantes, ¿entiendes? Por ejemplo, esta cosa que está en rojo, yo lo encontré importante.
Ya.
The Trump wing of the Republican Party is not only dominant, it is angrier and more determined to disrupt the normal course of events than the Tea Party movement was 10 years ago. And Trump commands a level of loyalty, the envy of authoritarians around the world. Esa es una cosa que podríamos discutir, ¿entiendes?
Ya. Lo que después, lo que no acabo de entender yo es por qué ese Trump tiene tanta influencia en ese tipo de gente, si es un déspota.
Resentimiento, verá.
¿Eh?
Resentimiento. Yo te conté lo que estaba pasando. Hay un problema de que hay mucha gente que tiene mucha inseguridad.
Bueno, sí, esa es la gente que...
Tienen todos los pobres, hay muchos blancos que se sienten muy vulnerables, su estatus muy vulnerable y su posición económica muy vulnerable. Se siente que no pueden competir contra los elites, que son los profesionales, no pueden competir con los negros que tienen educación y son gente que todavía han tenido el privilegio de ser blancos y aparte de eso trabajan en cosas como que se sabe que no van a durar, que no puede.
Yo cuando trabajaba encontré mucho tipo de esa gente. Yo trabajo con mucha gente así también. Son gente muy difícil y son gente.
Están muy seguras. Y mucha de esa gente pobre, siempre decían, you may be wretched, but at least you're not a nigger.
Yeah,
Mucha de esa gente lo único que tenían es ser blanco.
ser blanco, ya.
Pero bueno, el tipo muy
Entonces, bueno, entonces quiere discutir los artículos de ETSA. ¿Te parece que
empezamos con eso, Vera. Y si tú quieres, algún día encuentras otra cosa que te gusta más, me mandas el artículo y lo discutimos. Es para tener algo, Vera, para tener algo para empezar.
Right, okay.
Y no, si tú tienes algo mejor, discutimos algo mejor. Pero
No, it's fine. Porque yo leo el New York Times todos los días, así que es an easy thing to do. De pies a cabeza. So, okay. Very good, Ramonín.
voy a crear muy agradable como estamos haciendo esta hora, donde ellos hablan y nosotros nos quedamos callados y de vez en cuando hacemos un comentario.
Cada uno habla, sí. Right, pero también es lindo tener un poco de input y de decir cosas en la discusión, Ramón.
Y los dos dijimos, tú dijiste cosas y yo dije cosas y...
Yeah.
Pero bueno, entonces seguiré.
A veces yo me siento, veo este grupo y digo, what am I doing here with these people?
Ese grupo, Vera, ¿por qué te vas a sentir diferente?
Porque soy mujer, soy vieja, soy cubana, qué sé yo, I have to overcome many things.
Yo soy cubano.
Soy judía, I don't even know how they think about the Jews, you know, that's what I'm trying to bring it.
El problema de los judíos es que para tú ver un judío malo en los Estados Unidos es muy difícil, Vera. Entonces nadie ha visto...
En general es difícil ver judíos malos, pero hay judíos que son no ladrones, pero hay muchos judíos que han hecho muchas cosas feas en Estados Unidos, Ramón.
La mayoría de la gente cuando ven un judío, ven un tipo que es un profesional, tranquilo, caray, o sea que no ven a un judío. Ahora hay gente que vienen de...
Pero mucha gente ve a los judíos como que mataron a Cristo, la gente religiosa como esta.
Pero la gente educada, nunca ha visto un judío.
Son evangélicos, Ramón, esta gente.
Esa gente sí odian a los judíos. Y los neonazis y los white supremacists. Entonces, pero la gente que tiene educación, los elites, los que están graduados en las universidades, son muy raros que esa gente tenga un prejuicio, pero a lo mejor tienen algún prejuicio, pero no grande contra los judíos.
Bueno, yo te dije, cuando yo trabajaba en la universidad, ya te lo conté varias veces. Esta muchacha es una muchacha era un máster, un PhD, me dice, you know, I already told you that, Ramón. Remember?
Sí,
She said, you are the first Jew I ever meet, and you are so nice. ¿Qué idea tendría ella de los judíos? Lo que yo quisiera saber.
Bueno, que eran
Bueno, por eso te digo que you never know what people think about the Jews. Anyhow.
No te veo, entonces. Hasta luego.
Okay, bye.